It gives me immense pleasure to invite my distinguished guest today, who has been one of the key contributors in our nation building. We have honor to invite on our Ringside View today, Mr. T.K. Ramachandran, the Secretary of Ports, Shipping and Waterways of Government of India, with an illustrious career spanning several decades. Mr. Ramachandran brings a wealth of experience, vision to our discussion and understanding. Prior to his current role, Mr. Ramachandran served as the chairman of VOC Port Authority. So he has the actual on-ground experience of this particular portfolio. And under his visionary leadership, he propelled the port through the volatile periods of COVID era, and the coal and container dominated port grew 9% in FY24. Before assuming leadership in the port, Mr. Ramachandran held pivotal positions within the Tamil Nadu government, showcasing his versatility and astute administrative acumen. And anybody who's part of our most beloved Prime Minister, I'm sure, would have proved his mettle beyond doubt to be part of his vision and implementation team. I once again welcome you, Mr. Ramachandran. And as India dreams to be a developed nation and also to be amongst the top 5 economies soon, this ministry holds a very, very important role, because when we dream of being the manufacturing hub of the world, it is our efficiency, our logistical cost, which will make a lot of difference to our dreams. I would request you to first give a little broader perspective that where do we as India stand in terms of both our potential to have waterways and ports and shipping capabilities, and what are the key steps that are being taken to improvise and be a great support to the industry.
Thank you very much, Ms. Vora, and also for that very kind introduction. I will start off by saying that the Ministry of Port, Shipping and Waterways was renamed a couple of years back. Earlier, it was the Ministry of Shipping, and then it was realized that the ports are a very essential component of the entire ecosystem, and therefore ports also need to be part of the name nomenclature of the ministry. So ports and then waterways. So these three key pillars of the ministry look after the entire waterways sector, which means maritime shipping, which means coastal shipping, and also inland waterways. So this very well broadens the scope of the ministry to include all these areas. Now, as a maritime nation, we have a large, long coast, 7,500 kilometers plus. We have islands, and we have about 12 major ports and 217 non-major ports. Now, this nomenclature is again slightly confusing, in the sense that the major ports are the ones that are owned by central government. The non-major ports are not really non-major in the sense that some of them are really big, like for instance Mundra port. It's a non-major port, but that is only definitional. This is only definitional. So we handle, among the cargo that is handled, almost 55% is handled by the major ports, 45% by the non-major ports. So though these 12 ports are smaller in number, just few in number, they handle about 55% of the EXIM cargo. So over the last 10 years, there has been remarkable increase. We have doubled our cargo. So our cargo capacity as well as throughput. So capacity about 1,600 million tons in the non-major, in the major ports, and the throughput is about 819 million tons last year. So there has
Correct.
been a very good growth in this sector. Similarly, in the non-major ports also, we have about 1,000 million tons of capacity. There also, we have done well. So overall, and of course, that is about 45% of the overall throughput. So overall, I think the growth has been very good on the port sector. Now, as far as shipping is concerned, the government is looking very keenly at how to improve shipping. We own about 1.4% of the world's tonnage in terms of the ownership of ships, and therefore the government is very keenly looking at how to build ships, how to ensure ships are owned by Indians, how to flag more number of ships in India, and how to create a financing ecosystem for this entire thing within India. So we are looking at something like the Maritime Development Fund, and trying to put in a leasing and leasing owning entity and so on, which have all been in the works for the last year and will find fruition maybe in the next few months or so. And underpinning all, and of course the third pillar, which is waterways. Waterways has also grown. We are now doing 135 million. It was just, I think, a couple of dozen million tons of cargo. So we've grown 6, 7 times in the last 10 years. So waterways has really grown very well in the last 10 years. And the kind of investments that have been done in waterways, about 7,000 crores worth of investments through the Jalmarg Vikas project, JMVP, which is a World Bank assisted project. So our role there is to improve the waterways. They're called fairways. So make them deeper, ensure that there is draft throughout the year so that cargo and ferries and things can move. So these are broadly the three pillars. And our focus is on cargo movement, like I said, EXIM, then on the coastal cargo movement, and then on the inland cargo movement. So that is one pillar. The other pillar is on movement of passengers, ferries. So which means we are trying to connect places so that people can use the waterways as means of transport. So ferries. And the third pillar is the ro-ro, which means the vehicles can just go onto the vessel and then move on the vessel and then run off. So run on, run off from the vessel. So this is another pillar. And the last is what we call the cruise tourism pillar, which ensures that cruise tourism is improved at a great pace. Now across the world, there are large number of cruises which run, which are plying between islands, between in the Mediterranean Sea and in the Caribbean and so on. But cruise tourism is just taking off in our country, and last year was particularly successful. We had almost 100 different vessels calling our ports. So cruise tourism is another important thing because we think that in terms of employment generation, it can be a great thing. And river cruise. So again, cruise can be coastal, it can be ocean, and it can be river. On river cruise, as you are aware, we have the longest river cruise in the world, the one that is called the Ganga Vilas, which moved from Varanasi up to Guwahati, 3,000 and odd kilometers. Very successful, booked up to 27, 29, 28, 29, and by mostly tourists from abroad, European tourists and so on.
Wow.
So I think there's so much potential in this sector, and underpinning all this is the fact that there are three other underpinning things that we are looking at. One is the green part, which means whatever we do, we'll try to do it green. And the second thing is on technology. Use technology as far as possible to ensure that things are efficient. And the last thing is go digital, which means that there's absolute ease of doing business, etc. So on process, so I call it ease of doing business, cost of doing business, and speed of doing business. So we should have ease of doing business, which means the processes become simple. The speed of doing business, which means you do it fast, and then the cost of doing business, which means it becomes, financially viable for anyone using this entire system. And of course, our logistics costs in India are said to be between 14 to 12%, 12 to 14%, and our aim is to reduce it to about 8 to 9% in keeping with what is there in the developed world. And finally, I would like to say that the overall shift the shift from road to rail and then further to water is itself a green shift, because apart from being less
Correct.
costly, the per ton cost of moving goods by road is something like, say, 3 plus 3.5 plus. It comes down to 2.6, 2.8 when you move it by rail, and it falls drastically to about 1.8 to 2 when it comes to waterways. Therefore, the
Waterways.
shift itself, the costs are lesser, it is more green, the amount of fuel consumed is lesser, and so on. So our entire aim is therefore to become green, digital, ease of doing business, cost of doing business, this entire chain, value chain we are looking at. And therefore, we are really in interesting times, is what I would like to say to sum it up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your broad summary. So, first, I will take up within this large, big picture, and where there is humongous potential, possibility, and I can make out that when it is made up in mind, it's bound to come into action, and your vision is very clear which all areas you want to work on. So, we take up the port sector first. Is there any benchmark in terms of our ports efficiency that we were at, we are now, and what you or we as a country should vie for as our productivity, time to uh, you know work at ports? Are there any benchmarks that we want to achieve, which will in turn reduce the cost of logistics apart from waterways?
Yeah. So we have this vision, the Maritime Amrit Kaal Vision, and the Maritime India Vision,
Correct.
which was released in 21, the Amrit Kaal Vision 2047, which was released by the Honorable Prime Minister in October 2023. And we have seen remarkable progress in the last 10 years. And we rose from the India's ease of doing business ranking rose from 134 to 63. And our the other logistics performance index, we have come from 58 to 34. And specifically with regard to the port and the maritime, it is from 44 to 22. So everywhere we have improved. And you would be surprised to note that we the turnaround time in our ports, which is come down from 1.7 days to 0.9 days, and we are among the top countries in the world. Even Singapore is at one day. So we are at 0.99 days, which is about 2 hours. And even the other countries, major countries, some of, if I can just read out, Malaysia at 1, New Zealand at 1.1, the Germany at 1.3, USA at 1.5, and so on. And therefore, I think we are doing really good on turnaround time.
But that's
So
a
overall,
marked
ease of
improvement.
doing, yeah, marked improvement, in spite of the fact that we are, gone much ahead in terms of cargo. So we are handling more cargo, handling it more efficiently, and a large, portion of that is because of better processes, more automation, better infrastructure, and basically digitization and improving the ease of doing business. So I think
That's a
all this has contributed.
remarkable uh, performance when we can proudly say that we compare in terms of turnaround time to Singapore and Malaysia, which are largely dependent on this. So this is one of the best that we can say.
Yes, absolutely.
So now in terms of ports, have we really uh, utilized our potential because our coastlines are really huge? And what are our plans in terms of newer ports or expanding the facility for bigger ships? What are the key investments which are required?
So in the Maritime India vision, the Amrit Kaal vision, we are looking at an investment of something like 80 lakh crores in the next 25 years. And
Hmm.
over the last 10 years, in the last 1 year, that is after the Amrit Kaal vision, not even 1 year, just about 6 months, we signed during the Global Maritime India Summit, we signed MoUs worth about, or projects about 10 lakh crores. So we are already, moving fast ahead. And these are all projects which are taking off. So what are our plans? One is that we are looking at new ports like the one at Vadhavan, which is going to come up at a cost of about 80,000 crores. So Vadhavan port near Mumbai, that's going to be an entirely deep draft container port. Of course, it will also have bulk and all that. The other is the outer harbor project in Tuticorin, where we are spending almost 7 or 8,000 crores to create deep draft facilities for containers. And then there is a third port that is being envisaged, and that is at Galathea Bay in the Andaman Nicobar Islands. So these are three big ports in the government sector which are either expanding or coming up anew. Apart from this, there are a large number of state government ports under the maritime boards, which are being done with private sector participation, and that's being done um, in a number of places. New ports are coming up. There are also captive ports coming up, Gopalpur, Dhamra, Gangavaram, of course, Krishnapatnam, which is being developed, Vizhinjam, which is coming up near Trivandrum, and so on. So the port sector is expanding at a massive pace. And this is in keeping with what we want to do in terms of our GDP. So if your GDP is growing, then the trade also grows. And we have seen that if X is the growth in GDP, then 2X is the growth in the trade and therefore the requirement for EXIM facilities. So all this is pushing us towards expanding our port capacity. And of course, to just round it off, we are also doing PPP. The PP, the landlord model. So originally, the ports used to function with their own staff, their own equipment, and their own management of the entire port operations. What we have done now is we have shifted from this to a PPP model in which we will just be landlords, and JNPA has become the first PPP, 100% PPP port in the country, which means all their operations are in the hands of uh, private operators who are just giving us royalty and who run these operations very efficiently. So we have all international operators, many from India also, and therefore this we find is a much more efficient model. So that is also something which we are using in all our ports. So now we have about 35 berths which are under PPP. By the end, maybe in another 5 years, 80% of our berths will be under PPP.
So that will also bring a lot more efficiency, you think, and the new technology in terms of, as what you say, digitization, etc.
Yes, yes.
So port sector alone will have a huge investments. How are you all planning to fund that?
Yeah, so the funding, like I said, one is the PPP. In Vadhavan, for instance, though it's an 80,000 crore project, our role will be limited to providing the basic infrastructure. For instance, the breakwaters, the jetties, and so on, the dredging, the approach channel, and so on. And it'll be the industry which comes in with the balance funding. Maybe ours will be about 15, 20,000, 60,000 will come from the industry. So the PPPs are a major source of funding. The private sector will fund this. The second thing is we are looking at something called the Maritime Development Fund, which will be created with equity from partly from government, partly from the ministry, and partly from different government entities, ports, and this will be leveraged with external commercial borrowings, and we hope to create an ecosystem for financing both shipping as well as infrastructure, shipbuilding, and the ports. So this MDF is something that is being looked at with great anticipation by the industry. We've had several rounds of discussions with a large number of stakeholders, banks, lenders, and equity, those who are funding equity, NIF, then development finance institutions, DFIs, and so on, the World Bank, ADB, a lot of institutions we are talking to. So we hope to create this fund, which will ultimately work well on tenure, because tenure is something that is a cause of concern. Long tenure loans are difficult for the shipping industry to obtain. And then, of course, we are also looking at the interest rates.
Correct. So very comprehensive thinking has gone behind. And as we move If we are the fifth largest economy, our shipping itself also, as compared to what some of the world's leading economies are, of course, they are much larger, like US and China. They have a much larger volume share. So, how do we try to take this shipbuilding, uh, ship repair, and ship ownership forward? And are there any particular policy measures which you all have already unleashed or you think are required, which will really allow this potential to get unlocked?
Yeah, a large number of policy reforms have also taken place in the last few years.
Hmm.
And some of them I'd like to highlight is, for instance, the Major Port Act being, brought in place. The earlier act, Major Port Trust Act, was replaced by the Major Port Authorities Act in 21. And similarly, there are other acts which are being either modified so that we have more policy flexibility, and that includes the Merchant Shipping Act, the one that was brought out in 58. So that is also under the works now. Similarly, the Coastal Shipping Bill, and then the Indian Ports Bill, which looks at the Indian Ports Act and how to modify that, and a large number of policies which are under reform. One is the land policy guidelines, then the captive policy, the captive berthing policy, waterfront land development policy, the township policy, because a large number of ports, are situated within townships, or the townships have come around these ports, Mumbai, for instance, or Calcutta, or Chennai, or Kandla in Gujarat. So the townships have grown around these ports, and therefore there is a lot of possibility of unlocking the land value. So large number of policies. Similarly, on the Inland Vessels Act, Inland Vessels Rules, large number of policy reforms have taken place. So that is on the policy side. On the other side, we also have brought in place reforms for the way the ports function, the rules and regulations that are used for the ports to which the ports use to operate. Those have been also liberalized. More autonomy has been given to the ports, and so on. As far as shipping and shipbuilding is concerned, I think this is one area which is really been receiving a lot of attention. As you said, the shipping industry, it has a large number of sectors. You start off with financing, insurance, ownership, leasing, and then the arbitration ecosystem for this entire thing. Then you have flagging or registration of the ships, and then you have the operation and management of the ships, the manning and the crewing of the ships, and the welfare of the seafarers, and then finally shipbuilding, ship recycling, and ship repair. So I think a dozen areas on which we are working at the same time. So I can go on for hours on each of them, but then I think suffice it to say that on let's start off with ownership and leasing. So we are trying to see if we can create an ownership. See, $75 billion is what we are spending currently on leasing ships to carry our cargo. Out of the 85 billion that we spend as a country on freight, $75 billion per annum goes to leasing ships from abroad. That's a huge amount. And we have estimated that by the year 2047, this will rise to something like 400 billion, which is the outgo for leasing ships. So the question that we need to ask ourselves is, why is it that we are not able to have our own ships? So like I said, we don't own ships. We just own about 1.4% of the world's tonnage. So we have
Yes,
to increase ownership.
exactly.
If we increase ownership, then we don't need to spend so much on leasing. But for ownership to happen, you require financing. So we don't have the financing ecosystem. So where will because the funding has to come, it has to have tenure, long tenures. It has to have the lower interest rates. So we are trying to see how to put that in place, create a fund so that it can finance. Then insurance. Now, insurance, as you know, is under the hands of the P&I clubs, the protection and indemnity funds, clubs across the world, and it's a very close group. So insurance becomes a problem for shipbuilding, ship operation in India. So what can we do something on that? We are working with finance on that. And then of course, like I said, the arbitration. See, the thing is you can do all this, but ultimately if the legal system is such that it does not allow the system, there are delays, etc., then people will go off to Singapore or Dubai or London or something.
Correct.
So therefore we have to create this arbitration. So this is one set. The other set is on registration. See, we again flagging, we are again at 1 or 2% of the world's flags. So we are not that good on flagging. So we want to know why is it that people are not flagging in India, which means why are they not registering in India? So there are some issues there. There are issues related to taxation, related to direct, indirect, both taxes. So that we are trying to solve. On crewing, operations, again, technical management, we have Indian companies which technically manage ships. So we are strong on that. But where we are really strong is on crewing or manning. So about 1.7 or 2.8 lakh. Again, this has grown almost doubled in the last 10 years. We were at 1.4 or 5 and now we are at 2.8. So this is the 2.8 lakh seafarers of Indian origin. They work on ships and shipping companies across the world. In fact, you may remember this, the Baltimore incident. It was not our ship,
Yes.
it was not our flag, but there were some 20 Indians on that. So this is a very good industry which gives a lot of employment. It has a lot of employment potential. Therefore, we are looking at how to improve that entire ecosystem for manning, crewing, which means right from the examination system, making it digital. Something like the IIT JEE, just go and write the exam. So making it very easy for the seafarers to write the exam and get their certificates of proficiency, the certificate of competency, and so on. So that is one thing. And ensure seafarers' welfare, because they operate all around the world. And you might have heard how the government has stepped in, the Navy has stepped in to rescue our seafarers, to ensure their welfare across the world, not just in India, but across the world, whether it's the Red Sea or elsewhere. So that is one important aspect. And finally, coming to the building and this thing, shipbuilding is one thing which we have concentrated on. We brought in special projects, programs for that. For instance, the shipbuilding financial assistance policy. So this year we gave around 100 crores worth of subsidy. So large 126 ships are being built in Indian shipyards. But we want to create more capacity. And therefore, in January, we inaugurated the international ship repair facility at Cochin, huge one, which can at a time take about 6 to 10 ships it can repair. And then the other one is the new dry dock, huge, about 310-meter long dry dock in Cochin by the Cochin Shipyard Limited, where you can even build, huge vessels like VLCCs and LNG carriers. So that is the kind of capacity that is being built for shipbuilding. On ship repair, we are very gung-ho. We are creating clusters, one cluster in Cochin and one cluster near Kandla called Vadinar. So these two clusters will have the entire value chain. And we think that just like what happened in the automotive industry 30 years back when Maruti came in, and the entire value chain came in, which means all the small and medium industries also were brought in. So similarly, the entire value chain will be brought in, and the shipping, you will be surprised that some of the biggest companies which we are familiar with, Daewoo, Hyundai, Mitsubishi, lot of these companies which we know them today were actually earlier or were just shipping companies. They all started off in shipping, and shipping is a heavy industry. It leads to building up and growth of the heavy industries and the entire value chain. And that is what we are trying to attempt. We are in talks with many countries, Korea, Japan, and so on, Dubai, UAE, and so on, so that we can bring in the expertise, the finance, and also the capabilities, the training, and so on, so that we can create similar clusters in India. So the entire value chain of shipping is what we are looking at, and of course recycling. Recycling, already we are at number 2. We were at number 1. We are number 2 because of certain reasons. Other countries like Bangladesh or Pakistan were also doing that cheaper. But now with what is called the Hong Kong Convention, which has now been ratified, and it is going to become, it is going to become the law of the seas. So as per that, only those who are in conformity with the Hong Kong Convention, only those yards can break ships. So that also is going to come in. And finally, at the IMO, last year we won our place in Group B at the IMO Council, and we had the largest number of votes. I think it was 147 or 153, something like that. That many countries gave us their vote of confidence to be on the council. So it was a very successful campaign that we ran at the IMO. So our aim is not just to work in India on all these things, but also to be a world leader in terms of the influence that we can have in the matters. The Chabahar port we signed a few days back. Honorable Minister had gone and signed that. The contract was signed. So we want our presence in more countries. We want to be more globally vocal, etc., etc. I suppose that's how I like to explain it.
But I would of course open the floor for questions by my colleague and my analyst, as also by the audience. But I must say that we all as Indians are very lucky that, of course, our Prime Minister has envisioned us in so much detail, and have also identified his soldiers like you, who also carry the vision and are so thorough in terms of every small aspects which are required to unlock our potential. I really thank you as an Indian also, on behalf of my entire team, for being part of this particular uh, podcast or Ringside View, because it will be so much useful for anybody and everybody, as I feel the kind of growth which will come just because of even this one sector. And I know, like this, even railways have prepared their roadmap and they are working in detail to implement it. So extremely thankful and extremely proud to have you serving all of us, frankly.
Thank you so much for giving.
And I'm sure this kind of work and vision requires full dedication. Without that, you can't even run such a small organization as mine. So hats off.
Thank you so much. I think thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to tell you about ourselves, because we work very quietly, but
But we can
I think
see when
results
you
are there for.
brought our turnaround time at global comparison, how much you all would have worked. But sir, now I will need a little bit of your time for my analysts to ask question, and then floor to be open for questions from our audience.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Hi, sir.
Thank you.
That was a really detailed discussion. I mean, I've been covering port sector for some time, but the nitty-gritties that are known to you is quite a new thing for me.
Massive.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
So, sir,
Yeah.
so we have a question from Dr. Prashant Mishra. So the question regarding dredging sector, regarding its growth and investment. So, for example, apart from ports and coastal, we are also looking at inland waterways. So, uh, eastern side rivers would be requiring constant dredging on those routes. How do you see this capability of us developing over the time? Do we do it via own captive companies, or we require the foreign entities to pitch in for these maintenance, dredging, maintenance as well as on capital? Yeah.
So we have quite a good capacity in dredging. As you are aware, the Dredging Corporation of India, we own a large number of dredgers, 20 plus dredgers, and they have huge capacities, and they do their dredging in the major ports, and they are mostly tied up. When it comes to capital dredging, rock dredging, etc., we sometimes need to use companies from across the world, because they have special capabilities and these are highly skilled jobs. The Boskalis and similar companies from across the world, mostly European. Now the thing is, we are now also looking at dredging of the riverways. So in the riverways, we are having a large number of companies which are participating, doing the dredging, and this is a sector which will grow. And we envisage that over the next 5 years, there'll be huge dredging requirements, and we are actually doing the building of a dredging of a dredger in the CSL, one of the modern dredging equipment in CSL, which will be ready in a couple of years. And we hope to be then self-sufficient even in dredgers, even in building of dredgers in India. So the sector has huge potential. Absolutely.
Sure, sir. So the investment potential, are we putting in some investments, or we are waiting for?
Yeah, so investments not only in creating the dredgers, in building dredgers. So one is being built now, right away. Now it's being built. Apart from that, any other scheme in our the financial assistance policy also includes dredgers. And if it is green, we give you additional incentives. So what is 20% for ordinary ships or vessels? We then add 20% for green, if it's green or hybrid, etc. So all those advantages are there.
One question I had from my side only, like for example, in port sector and in coastal, designing or deciding on a project is relatively based on parameters such as distance of the port towards our hinterlands or something like that. So it becomes lucrative. But when we speak about inland waterways, I mean, it is a very complex cascade of rivers which are flowing across, and you also have a competitive road network which is built nearby. So how you, and there are smaller projects along the way you built in on the inland waterways. So how does this, I mean, you decide on a project when it comes to inland waterways? Is it's much more complex than deciding a port network around the country.
Yeah, maybe you're right there. But then you see, the inland waterway sector, unfortunately, has not developed over the last several decades. So now there is concentration on that because I said it's cheaper and it's also environmentally friendly. Now, the issue is, unless you develop this synergy between rail, road, and water, what we are calling now the multimodal. आपने सुना होगा about this गति शक्ति project, है ना? I mean, जो गति PM गति शक्ति project के बारे में, जहाँ पे हम सारे ये जो multimodal infrastructure है उसको सब एक जगह में लगाते हैं, so that we are able to ensure that you can shift from one mode to the other very seamlessly. So there are 32 multimodal parks being now conceived or built across the country. जैसे एक अभी असम में हुआ है, एक अभी चेन्नई के पास हुआ है, and these are all taking off. So the idea is that the multimodal approach, the Gati Shakti approach, will ensure that there is seamless transition between the various modes of transport. And for that, we are not really worried about road or rail. See, whichever is most efficient, most cost effective, and which takes least time, that will have to take the traffic. That is the best way. That is best for the country. So we are not looking at it from our ministry point of view or ex-ministry point of view. It's a whole of government approach, and therefore we will place our resources, our infrastructure wherever it is most efficient. Like for instance, Kerala आप लीजिए. Kerala में entirely the state is linear. Now here is a state where the roads are, comparatively, when you look at the other states, there is not much space for the roads to expand. आप गए होंगे, आप वहाँ घूमे होंगे. So the roads are all curved. To take a container truck along those roads becomes difficult. Now there, luckily, nature has given them the blessing of linear waterways right from Calicut up to Kollam. I mean, it's about several hundred kilometers. Now we are planning to concentrate more on such places where you can't use the roads much. You have a constraint of capacity there. You can't use the sea also because then you'll have to have a different class of vessels. The costs are increasing, and also in monsoon time the sea becomes very rough. So in such places you use the coastal ways, and we are now seeing how we can dredge, ensure that and then water is also available throughout the year. So there are large number of constraints, and when all these constraints are not existing, जहाँ पे पानी है, draft का problem नहीं है, it becomes cost effective. So there is where we will plan our infrastructure. जैसे गंगा में we will not plan upstream because there is an issue of draft. जैसे यमुना में but we will plant downstream of Patna, downstream of Varanasi, and in maybe in Assam, through Bangladesh, in Gujarat, wherever it is possible, in Narmada, in Godavari. So the placing of infrastructure is completely dependent on all these parameters that I just mentioned. Okay.
So I think this approach of an integrated planning across projects is one of the reasons wherein we can take a call that logistics cost would decrease over the time, because I mean initially everything was happening in silos.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's great to hear, sir. Another question we have from Dr. Prashant Mishra is, are we working on any green ships like hydrogen powered engines or something like that in ships? Do we have the technology built in currently, or are we prioritizing this
Yeah. So,
thing
like
in?
I said, we have a very important vertical on green ships, green ports, and we have created a national center of excellence in green ports and shipping, which was launched last year in January. And one of our aims is to ensure that because we are fuel deficient, we have to import our fuels. To the extent possible, we must convert to fuels that are locally possible and locally manufacturable, right? So, so we are working with the National Hydrogen Mission of the MNRE Ministry, and we have done a pilot, or we have started a pilot where we are converting two of our vessels which are now with the Shipping Corporation of India. We are converting them into methanol vessels. Now it doesn't matter whether it's green methanol or whatever at the initial stage, at least, because we just want to demonstrate that we can have methanol vessels. Now when we have the vessels, also we need the ecosystem. So what we've done is we've identified three ports. Of course, ultimately all our major ports will become hubs, but we've identified three ports. One is Kandla, one is Paradeep, and the other is Tuticorin. So in all these three ports, we've given land to a large number of companies who have taken. I was so surprised to see the kind of response that we got from the renewable energy companies. At least a dozen of them in Kandla, they have taken about 3,500 acres of land to put up I think 5 million or more tonnage of green hydrogen annually. Similarly, around 300 acres in Tuticorin, in Paradeep, all these have been now bid out. The companies are all going to put up their electrolyzers. The hydrogen ecosystem has been created. So green hydrogen, green methanol, green ammonia. We are tying up with countries across the world, Singapore, other places, Europe, so that there is exports. So what we are doing is we have also sanctioned about 35 crores for bunkering, transport, and storage of hydrogen and hydrogen derivatives in the ports, so that when the thing is, here is the chicken and egg kind of situation. You must create the ecosystem. You must also create the vessels. So you might have a green vessel but no green ecosystem, then you can't fuel the ships. So we are looking at both simultaneously, so that in maybe a couple of years we have the entire ecosystem ready to take on green, the entire to become green.
One question we have from 3D. It's regarding somewhere the growth port handling capacity for next 5 years growth projections they're asking. But currently what we see is around 2,500 MMT of overall capacity we have. We utilize around 1,600 MMT.
Yes.
So there is a big mismatch when it comes to utilization of in major ports, for
So in the
example.
port sector, you see, we do not wait for 100% capacity utilization, because if you do that, then you'll cross 100%, and then for 5 years you will be left with no capacity. So in the port sector, 70% is what we look at as being the ideal time when you should plan for capacity expansion. So here we are almost going to be touching that. And in individual cases, I know in some oil berths, in some container berths, we are touching 80-90%. So it's all, yeah, 80-90%. So this we are now, like you rightly pointed out, 2,500 is the total capacity. We are looking at expanding, like I said, Vadhavan will add about 20 million. Galathia will add about the 6-7 million. Tuticorin will add about 4 million. So it's a huge capacity expansion that is being planned across the major ports. And also you think of all the minor ports, the non-major, sorry, not the non-major ports. which are also planning similar capacity expansions.
Right.
So we are going to have huge growth in the next 5 years.
And sir, with the global ambitions comes like global volatility also. So what we are seeing in our nearby periphery, the Red Sea crisis, for example, which is happening over there. So I mean, when we are looking at now assets which are beyond our own coast. So how would we think of dealing with those things? Because again, for example, via Chabahar port, there could be some sort of a different route which could be routed, cargoes could be routed through to Europe or Russia via Chabahar and all. So, when planning for these ports outside India, we also look at the volatility which could take place in the future, like that. I'm planning
Yeah,
those
so
projects.
we are looking at a number of alternatives. The Red Sea was a revelation of sorts, in the sense that, within of course, before that, the Middle East crisis in the Middle East, before that, COVID. So it's not as if the shipping industry and the ports are not, have not been facing crisis over last few 10, 15 years. They've been doing that, but they've also been handling it, and I must say quite efficiently. Of course, the costs will increase. Well, like during COVID, we had huge cost increases, 300-400% in container movements, etc. So that will happen, but I think overall it was managed well. Similarly, during the recent crisis, we have had, diversions. Costs have increased, insurance has increased, for instance, but overall I think it has been managed very well, and we have not had a single case where the ports have complained that, look, we have lost cargo has not really suffered, trade has not really suffered, and the overall whole of government approach has helped all the ships to be confident, all the shipping, the entire shipping industry, shipping lines to be confident that movement can take place. Fertilizer movement has happened, petroleum movement has happened. We've not really had any shortages, so nothing has really gone awry. So I think overall we will manage, and we will manage it also by looking at alternate corridors. You must have heard of the IMEC corridor. You must have heard, of course, Chabahar opens up to the INSTC,
Yes,
the
I'm
International North-South Transport Corridor. Then there is the Eastern Corridor, the Maritime Corridor, which goes to Vladivostok. So a number of these corridors, when they open up, then the risks are minimized or
I
reduced.
think the Economist magazine article highlighted this thing that one of the biggest achievement in PM Modi, both the tenure is one of the infrastructure which has been built up in the ports and the better utilization which has
Yeah.
picked up.
So for us, it was very pleasant, and it was a very pleasant surprise to read this article and to see that, the economists talking so highly of the improvements in the port sector. So we are very happy that the world is taking note and notice,
Yes, yes.
and therefore, of course,
Congratulations to your entire team, sir.
yeah. So we have a very, very committed, dedicated team working, hundreds of people working in the sector, especially in the ministry, in the ports, everywhere. So I should thank all of them for
Because
getting us this
these are
accolade.
some of the
Thank
projects
you.
which largely go unnoticed by the normal people. So I mean, when because uh, it takes a lot of time to build in a port. Probably it will go beyond the part of the government itself. So
Yeah.
prioritizing
Well,
the
the thing is that unlike the other sectors, or road or rail, where there is a lot of public interface,
yeah,
शिपिंग में पब्लिक इंटरफेस ज्यादा नहीं होता है. किसी को ये नहीं पता होता है उनका पेट्रोल कहीं से लाया जा रहा है, शिप से लाया जा रहा है, कैसे उसका आयात निर्यात होता है. People don't know, but we are at the at the in the backstage, so nobody knows about us. But what we are trying to do is we are trying to see if we can bring it to the public in a more interesting manner, and that is through our CSR as well as our community outreach, for fishing communities, coastal communities, and all. And also, I forgot to talk about the lighthouses. We have about 243 lighthouses across the country. Many of them are beautiful old heritage structures. So we did lighthouse tourism as per the guidance of the Honorable Prime Minister. we had a lighthouse tourism project in which 75 lighthouses were upgraded and tourism facilities were built around them. So lakhs of people are now visiting these lighthouses, which were otherwise forgotten corners of the country. So this was completed in February this year and was inaugurated.
Right.
So I think a lot of these things we need to do so that people become aware of, like for instance, this podcast itself might help more people to get to know what we are doing.
Absolutely. And I must highlight this fact that it takes a lot of resolve to decide on a project, because till the time the project comes to fruition, the government itself might not remain, but it's for the greater good of the nation that those projects come into life. So it takes a lot of resolve to be in the project. So I also have, sir, a question from Mr. Jeet regarding the shipbuilding projects. Shipbuilding thing which we are planning. So any specific ships we think that we could enter into, like crude tankers, product tanker, bulk, or LNG carriers, something like that we want to get into specific, or
Yeah. So
we
we
want to keep
want to create the entire shipbuilding ecosystem. We are studying it very closely, and like I said, I gave a detailed answer a few minutes back. But basically, just to repeat that, the entire value chain, whether it's shipbuilding or repair or ownership, leasing, financing, insurance, the entire value chain is where we want to be present, because currently we are not there.
Correct.
So if you want money to finance a ship to be built in India, it's difficult to get that money. So we've created a scheme for that, the Ship Building Financial Assistance Policy. And now we are seeing a lot of traction, and a lot of companies are coming forward to use that scheme to build ships. So I think 126 ships are so far have been given that subsidy, and they've come up, they're building them in our own shipyards. So there's huge scope, and we want to create that entity, a leasing owning entity. We want to create a shipbuilding facilities. We want to create a maritime development fund, so that all manner of ships are built in India. At least we have the capability, and I said it's a heavy industry, and along with that you will have a large number of supportive industries, MSMEs, employment. It's a huge opportunity,
Right.
and which we think we should not miss.
Right. And so,
Especially when
I
this
will
green,
just take
and
1 minute
remember that this green transition is happening now, and we must get into it. I think we missed the VLCC bus, but at least the green shipping bus we should not miss, because everywhere the technology is being demonstrated, developed. So if we get in at this point of time, it's going to be very good for India. And we have the technology, the brains, everything. All we need to do is to step in and create the ecosystem.
Correct. I'll just take 1 minute here, Harshal. That right now, as I broadly understand, most of the shipbuilding is with the public sector units. Is broadly correct understanding?
Yes.
So it's a way forward, of course, in terms of order books, they will substantially benefit. But does government also think that to really manage the kind of growth which is likely to come in the shipbuilding industry, when you put so much effort to develop the whole ecosystem, will these public sector units need to be privatized, or they will continue to be within the public sector itself? Is there any thinking on those lines?
No, so there are large number of shipping yards both in the private and public sector. So each of them will perform their respective roles, and the public sector, at least in the CSL, the one that the Cochin shipyard, which works under the ministry, the order books are full for the next 10 years. So we have no issues on that. Similarly, I'm sure that the other shipping yards under the defense ministry are also have their hands full. The question is that how do we create an ecosystem that encourages the private sector to get into this and business of shipbuilding and ship repair and all that. So I think once we create an ecosystem that is supportive, everything will happen automatically. But that ecosystem needs to be created, and that's where we are working.
Correct. Understood.
Yes, sir. So one question what we have it is what is the minimum tonnage of ships we are planning for coastal movement within India?
Coastal movement is now at 135 million tons, I think, around 4 or 5%. So we are quite sanguine. We have put in a lot of measures to uh, support and encourage coastal movements. And as you are aware, the VRCs, the vessel-related charges have been reduced. I think 40% is the concession that we are giving. Similarly, there is priority berthing. Then the ports have got infrastructure, coastal berths dedicated for coastal shipping. The SOPs have been put in place to handle as a coastal cargo, so that they don't have to go through the usual customs kind of route. Then we are also contemplating a VGF scheme for coastal shipping, and already all these measures have shown a lot of result, because coastal shipping has grown, I think, by several percent in the last few years, and CAGR, and we are now at about 135, and we are thinking of coastal as being a very viable alternate to roads. So it is being looked at very, very closely, so that it becomes a viable alternative to the road and rail
And
network.
sir, and the last question what we have is in on transshipment. So, for example, when we are thinking this year around, there will be this Adani transshipment which will go live in Kerala, and then you also have a transshipment terminal which is going to be built up in Colombo, and then we have a transshipment which we are planning in Nicobar Island. So, with this transshipment, so Nicobar Islands per se, if we speak, it falls in a very major traffic region of the global volume. So, do we need some sort of regulatory reform, some business-friendly reforms wherein volumes over there would really pick up quite well on those routes?
So
And what
transshipment,
would
you see, the transshipment is what is defined in many ways. One of the transshipment that we are talking about is Indian cargo getting transshipped at international ports. Okay, that is about 4 million tons, which is now happening. 4 million TEUs. Okay, not tons, TEUs. So what we are saying is that if we want our cargo being currently transshipped at international ports, like say Colombo, which does about 2.5 million, then Singapore, Jebel Ali, Port Klang, and so on. So our cargo is going there, getting aggregated and getting transshipped. So this cargo, to us, it seems very obvious that this adds costs. When you transship, when you have a second or a third handling of the cargo, then it adds costs to the entire logistics chain. So we spend about $100 extra in this transshipment when it goes from India to these
Hmm.
places. So it seems to us logical that this transshipment should happen in India. So which means if 4 million, you just multiply it, it comes to about 2-3,000 crores. So that much is what we will save. So that transshipment, if we have to do in India, we have to create the capacity, and that's why we are doing
Right.
this transshipment. Then there is what is called as international transshipment, which means it comes from a country A, goes to a port in India, and goes to a country B, which means it does not enter India at all. It's international transshipment. Now, this is the kind of transshipment that a port like Virinjam might be looking at. Okay, so these two things are different, and both of them are possible. Both of them will grow, and we are looking at the GDP growth of the kind that we are planning, or which the economic survey is planning. Then obviously all these are going to be
So,
required.
like overall India, if we see, it's like 20 million TEU cargo. So 4 million is something we are looking at. Ki we'll get it back from
Correct,
Colombo.
correct.
That's done.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yes, that's it, ma'am, from my side. Any final
Sir,
words?
thank you so much for your time. And uh, I can say that some of the best CEOs always have a vision, a management capability to implement, and beyond all the numbers by heart, because they've internalized everything so much that they don't need to look around for any numbers. And whatever questions came, your answers were absolutely data backed. So I'm very confident that you and your entire ministry will definitely achieve the goals that you all have set for yourself. Thank you so much for your time and wish you all the very best.
Thank you very much. I also enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.